Okay, well, good morning, and you are all very welcome to today's conference. I'm Carolyn Ferris, Executive Director of Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland, and it's my privilege today to chair today's event, the conference Happy and Healthy Communities, the Impact and Value of Being Active Outdoors. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused us very much to work and to live differently. And I think never before has the value of the outdoors, particularly to health and well-being, been so apparent. It's essential that our sector takes the opportunity to champion its role in creating a happier and healthier society. And so today, through this conference, we hope to do just that. So in this morning's session, first of all, we will have opening remarks. That will be followed by our keynote speaker. Then we will have a session on the results of the first ever population-wide research study on how people in Northern Ireland engage with the outdoors. We hope then to launch our own operational plan for 2020 to 2025 before concluding with a question and answer session. But we want you to engage with us through the conference today, and so you can do that through using the icon at the top of the screen and the question and answering panel. So we would love to hear from you as people are speaking, as the conference progresses. If you have any comments or any questions, just type them in and someone behind the scenes will be taking a record of those, and hopefully we'll be able to use that in the question and answer session at the end of this morning. So to officially start the conference today, we invited several of our ministers to make a few opening remarks. We were delighted when all 5 of the ministers came back with a resounding yes. So if technology allows us, we are going to hear from 4 of these ministers now. We're going to hear from Gordon Lyons, Minister of DAERA, Robin Swan, the Health Minister, Deirdre Hargey, Minister of Communities, and then Nicola Mallon, the Minister of the Department of Infrastructure. So I'll hand over now to Elizabeth.
I would like to thank Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland for inviting me to say a few words to this conference. As I came into work in the Stormont estate today, I watched the many people enjoying this accessible green space, engaging in nature, improving their health and well-being, and being refreshed. I know that there are similar high numbers of people exploring outdoor spaces every day in my department's forest and country parks, and in similar areas managed by others, be they councils, not-for-profit organisations, farmers, businesses, or other government departments. Providing and managing outdoor spaces and access routes within our living, working, active, rich and special landscapes in a sustainable way is a collaborative effort by so many people and bodies, and the number of ministers speaking to this conference reflects this. The evidence from the research presented at this conference will provide really useful information to further enable us all to develop and implement future policy and opportunities for outdoor recreation in green and blue spaces. My department provided the grant aid for this research on behalf of the Cross-Government Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group. For DAERA, it will help inform the development of the Environment Strategy, the Green Growth Strategy, and Green Recovery, the current review of outdoor recreation legislation and future funding, such as the new Agri-Environment Schemes, the Rural Development Fund, and the Environment Fund. It will provide evidence to shape the development of additional sustainable natural green corridors across towns, cities and landscapes, connecting people to their environment, to each other and the services they need. This in turn will deliver improvements in health and well-being, rural economic and tourism opportunities, and strengthen the connection with and appreciation of our natural environment. I thank all who have been involved in providing and maintaining outdoor recreation opportunities during these difficult times, and I thank those involved in developing this research. In this year, where the United Kingdom will host both the United Nations conferences on climate change and on biodiversity, I encourage every one of us to continue to collaborate to deliver the opportunities and benefits provided by off-road outdoor recreation. I look forward to getting back out of the office into our accessible green and blue spaces and to be inspired by our living, working, active landscapes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to have been asked to open this conference, and I would like to add my words of welcome, albeit virtually. The theme of the conference is Happy and Healthy Communities, the impact and value of being active outdoors. Happy and Healthy Communities is an apt and timely positive title for this conference, particularly as being active in the outdoor environment has become increasingly important throughout the COVID pandemic. The need for families and communities to exercise frequently and locally and to maintain good physical and mental health has never been so keenly felt. The importance of people of all ages and all abilities being more active more of the time is fundamental to our recovery, and it is in that context that we look to maximise the impact and value of being active outdoors. I welcome the opportunity that this online conference presents to discuss the importance of our outdoor recreation to the community and the opportunities it presents for the physical and mental well-being and health of the population, among many other benefits including accessibility, inclusion and equality. It is recognised by many that outdoor recreation and its associated venues have had a prominence during the COVID crisis. I expect that status to continue as we seek to bring that needed recovery and resilience to the social and economic life of our society, and as communities seek to re-engage with sport and physical activity in the medium to longer term. With increased levels of participation comes responsibility and the need to encourage safety for all, in parallel with respect for the local communities, landowners and the natural environment. My department is aware of a change in the way in which people engage in physical activity. Strategic walking and cycling provisions need to be addressed as together we look at the importance of planning for increased engagement with our great outdoors for the future. As you discuss a range of important issues today, I am pleased to say that the outdoor recreation remains a vital component within the work of my department and will be an important element within the development of a new 10-year strategy for sport and physical activity. It is anticipated that following public consultation over the next 8 weeks, a new strategy will be published in the spring, and the views of all of those with an interest in outdoor recreation issues will be welcomed in that process. No doubt the discussions in the conference today will touch on many vital issues for the sector and provide added impetus for our collective work in optimising the outdoor environment as a natural and accessible benefit for the whole of our community. I am sure you will enjoy and learn from your discussion today, and that the conference will be a resounding success.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide some opening remarks for the conference on today's launch of your strategy, Happy and Healthy Communities, the impact and value of being active outdoors. Unfortunately, due to other pressures, I cannot stay for the whole session. There is increasing awareness of the impact of inactivity and sedentary behaviour on our physical and mental health. 65% of our adult population are either overweight or obese, and this is an increasing trend. Living with excess weight is a risk factor for a range of chronic diseases, and research has also shown it can reduce life expectancy by up to 9 years. In my department, we seek to encourage people to participate in more physical activity, and we have an overall objective to increase the percentage of the population meeting the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines on physical activity. Happy and healthy communities will help us to achieve the increases that we seek. The latest guidelines recommend that adults should undertake at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise every week. Something as accessible as a family walk outdoors will help to achieve this exercise target, while the mental health benefits of time spent in green spaces are well recognised. Similarly, walking as a form of active travel in urban spaces can give the same benefits. The experience of the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the increased health risks of overweight and obesity. We must look at the measures to help people take control of their own future by losing weight, getting active and adopting healthier lifestyles. One positive is that nearly half of the population are spending more time outdoors than this time last year. More than half expect to do more after lockdown ends. This is a trend which we would all like to see increasing. These are challenging times, and COVID-19 has given us all a huge wake-up call. I'm delighted that people are engaging more with their local spaces and places during this difficult time. We have fantastic outdoor spaces from the Sperms to Strangford, from the Glens of Antrim to the urban greenways which connect communities. I wish you every success for today, and I look forward to working with all the sectors and partners to help people take control of their own future by losing weight, getting active and adopting a healthier lifestyle, and to increase access to green spaces in both urban and rural settings.
Good morning. I want to thank Outdoor Recreation for this opportunity to address the opening of the Happy and Healthy Communities Conference about the benefits of getting more people active and outdoors. In particular, thank you to Dawson for sharing the results of the recent Northern Ireland-wide research into engaging with the great outdoors. These align with my own objectives for active travel and highlight the benefits for our health and well-being, our environment, our local economies, our communities, and for tackling inequality. Since taking up my post as Infrastructure Minister, I have made it my priority to deliver safe and accessible routes that give people the freedom and confidence to walk and cycle as part of their everyday routine. During the pandemic, many more people are doing this, and it shows the way to go for the future. Getting outdoors as part of our everyday activities will help improve mental and physical health and well-being, improve air quality and social inclusion. And this year, I announced £20 million for funding for blue-green infrastructure to support transformation of our communities, promoting active travel and shaping our places to live in the new normal. Greenways and community paths can make a huge difference to the daily lives of people by providing the opportunity to enjoy safe and easy access to fresh air and exercise, encouraging more people to commute to work by foot or bicycle, more children to walk or cycle to school, and provide a vital leisure resource for local people and visitors alike. Greenways will ultimately create public spaces that will enhance our quality of life and leave an enduring legacy to be enjoyed by the future generations. I am very keen for my department to work in partnership with the many stakeholders in local communities to accelerate actions that promote active travel as a safe and carbon-free alternative form of travel. There is much more to be done, and I am impatient for change. Together, we need to be committed to getting our communities more active outdoors. My walking and cycling champion is keen to understand options and solutions for active travel right across the north. So, with that in mind, I hope you enjoy the conference.
Okay, thank you very much to all the ministers and their officials for helping put together those short videos. I mean, I think just what it demonstrates already about the conference today is just the importance of outdoor recreation across so many departments and how it can contribute in so many ways to meeting the government's priorities and the outcomes going forward of the new 2021 draft programme for government. So it's really great to have the support of all those various departments today. So thank you for that and to the ministers. So moving on, we are delighted to have with us today Professor Shane O'Mara. Shane, hopefully you're with us okay. Shane is a Professor of Experimental Brain Research at Trinity College Dublin. He is a psychologist, a neuroscientist, and a writer. And I suppose we first came across Shane through his writing. Several people in the office had been reading one of Shane's books in praise of walking. And really, when we read that book, we really just felt that so much of Shane's research resonates with our own thinking about the importance of walking. And so we were delighted when Shane agreed to come today and give the keynote speech. Shane, I'll just hand over to you so you can get your slides uploaded. Thank you.
So can I thank you for the invitation to do this? I'm delighted to be able to be here. I'm sorry I'm not up with you. It would be wonderful if we could all gather together, but hopefully the vaccines will be the savior rather of us all where this terrible pandemic is concerned. So what I'm going to do today in about the next 15 or 18 minutes or so is talk to you about walking and what we know about the science of walking. There have been many things have emerged over the past 15 or 20 years, and what I want to try and do is give you kind of two views on walking. One from the inside out, so that would be a kind of a brief understanding of how it is the brain enables us to walk, and then from the outside in, so from how society impacts on how we walk and what we can do to increase the level of walking that we engage in everyday life. Okay, so let's start with this slide. I'm sure you all, or most of you, will have seen this clip from Monty Python at some point, which is the minister from the Ministry of Silly Walks. Human walking is a unique activity, that is certainly true, during which the body step by step teeters on the edge of catastrophe. That is both true and false for reasons that I hope to demonstrate over the next few slides. At the bottom here we have John Cleese from the Ministry of Silly Walks. What I want you to do is not look at his feet while he's walking. What I want you to do is look at his eyes and the position of his head, and look at the stability of the head despite what his feet and legs are doing. So he's able to move, he's able to throw his legs akimbo, he's able to rotate his head about its own axis, catch somebody else's eye, nod to them, and continue walking. A robot, as I've already said, cannot do this. This is a really remarkable achievement on the part of humans, and one that we are scratching the surface of understanding. So how do we learn to walk at all? Well, let's look at walking in context for a moment. In order to learn to speak, you need to be exposed to a language community. If you're not exposed to a language community, you may be able to make sounds, you may be able to point, you might be able to engage in rudimentary forms of communication. But the full expression of human language requires that you have a language community. Walking, by contrast, does not. So how do we know how you learn how to walk? Well, there are lots of studies ongoing now, and I'll just focus on this particular one from Karen Adolph's lab. The reason I do that is because the title tells you how you learn to walk. You learn to walk by making thousands of steps and having dozens of falls per day. Now, how do we know this? Well, what we do, you can see here on the top right, is you bring an infant pre-walking to the laboratory and you study it longitudinally as it learns to walk. So it has a gait mat where it can walk along. You have tracking cameras while it moves around the environment, moves up these stairs, all of these kinds of things. And you can track the position of the child in three-dimensional space, and you can track the change in the child's ability to walk over time. And that's the crucial thing. So here we're not looking at developmental milestones. Instead, we're looking at what happens to the development of walking as the result of merely the passage of time. And what you find is something really remarkable, and something I suspect most people don't suspect at all, which is that the amount of locomotor experience, learning to walk, that a 12 to 19-month-old child engages in is enormous, absolutely immense. On average, they crank out about 2,300 steps per hour. And this is where, of course, Napier is wrong. The child falls on average 17 times per hour, but it falls without injury. If it fell with injury, it would not, or it would find it very difficult to learn to walk. So there are two things to think about here. The child crawls and is in a very stable position. It's hard to fall when you're on your hands and knees. And then it changes or transitions in this period, excuse me, to walking. And it does so as a matter of developmental inevitability. But this can only happen because the child practices in enormous quantities of walking over a long period of time. The child does not need to see other people walking. What the child needs is three-dimensional space in order to walk around in. And this is why humans are such marvelous walkers. We engage in all of this practice. It's very tiring. This is why children sleep enormous amounts at this age. And we do not remember how it is that we learn to walk if we've learned to walk during this very early period of life. Now, let's move to the other end of life when you're up and about and moving in the real world. And I'm going to focus on what I call here rough walking, walking out in the wild. So what you have here is a movie, and you see somebody wearing a mobile laboratory. This chap is walking at quite a high speed over a very, very difficult and unstable terrain, but engaging in stable movement in that terrain. He has a laptop on his back. He's got a variety of spotters for tracking on his limbs, and he's also wearing an eye tracker as he moves through the environment. Now, why do you do all of this? Well, how you walk like this is actually something of a mystery. And this wonderful paper by Mary Hayhoe and her colleagues has solved some of the mysteries. So the person has moved at quite a speed across this terrain and gets to this endpoint and does so without injury. How do you do this? Well, this is how you do it. This is a representation, a stick figure of the person as they move. And if you look at eye position, what is happening is the person is throwing their gaze out 2 meters, 3 meters ahead, a meter ahead, and then making the decision to place their foot within a fifth of a second. So this is a very, very rapid pattern recognition problem, which is solved as we move dynamically through the world. And we're able to do it in such a way that we can pick out the rocks that are stable to stand on and keep our position relatively stable while we are doing this. The eyes flicker around in the head, looking at different positions in space. The head itself remains stable, but what we do is this pattern of look forward, look back, place the foot. Look forward, look backward, place the foot. And this is an immensely rapid process. We still don't know the underlying mechanisms, but nonetheless, you can see from the video itself that the person is very well capable of choosing stable platforms on which to place their feet. Now, it's often said, and some of the reflections from the ministers kind of get to this point, that walking is good for you. I'm not going to go into the reasons why walking is good for your body, especially, but what I do want to do is talk about how we know walking can be good for your brain, and in particular, how walking can be good for your mood. So here's a very clever experiment which looks at incidental ambulation, as it's referred to as, or incidental walking. So students are brought to the psychology laboratory, ostensibly for a task where they have to rate the beauty or otherwise of buildings. And at the start and at the end of this exercise, they rate how they are feeling themselves. One group look at pictures in the lab of the buildings around the Iowa State campus, and another group are brought to walk and look at the buildings. So the difference here is one group is walking incidentally. They're not walking specifically for exercise. They're walking just to go and do the judgment of the beauty of the buildings. And what you find is quite remarkable. The group that stay seated show no boost in how they feel. They don't get a boost to their positive feelings. Whereas the group that have gone for the short walk to look at the different buildings show a large and reasonably sized boost to how they feel. Other work has shown that interventions of this type can give you a boost to how you feel that will last approximately 2 to 3 hours post a short walk, and perhaps longer for a longer walk. So walking at least in this population, is a really effective means to boost positive feelings. Now, might be a peculiarity of this population. So the interesting question is what happens in a larger population, especially where a scourge of the modern world is concerned, namely major depressive disorder. So I've chosen this study by Samuel Harvey, who's a public health physician, and his colleagues in Australia. And what they've done here is very interesting indeed. They track over an 11-year period 34,000 adults. These adults have no mental disorders on induction into the study, and they're regularly tested and regularly measured for a variety of psychiatric conditions, and they also have measures of exercise, which is principally walking, taken as well. And then they're tracked over 11 years. They're not asked to engage in activity, they're merely tracked, so that this is not an active intervention study. And what you find is something quite stunning, that if you compare the least active with everybody else in the study, that people who are active are on average 12%, sorry, let me rephrase that, about 12% of future cases of depression do not occur in the active population relative to the inactive group. And the effect arises for really small amounts of physical activity, about 1 or so hours of physical activity a week, typically, as I've said, a walk. In population terms, this is quite remarkable, because what it suggests is that if we could get the population at large moving and engaging in more physical activity, we would be likely to see approximately a 12% reduction in future cases of depression. That might actually be larger. We don't know that yet, because this kind of intervention hasn't been conducted on a sufficiently wide scale. But what we can say is that regular leisure time exercise protects against future depression, and it does so at a rate that is approximately the equivalent of treatment by antidepressant medication or cognitive behavior therapy. It's often said walking gives you a boost to creativity. So we've shown that you can walk stably in an unstable environment, that walking gives a boost to mood. What else can walking do for you? Well, walking can assist in creative problem solving. And how do we know this? Well, there's lots of ways of doing this, and I've chosen this famous study because it was the first one to isolate this effect. Now, writers and mathematicians and others for generations have all spoken of the positive benefits of walking. However, psychologists have come late to the party to try and figure out if there is an effect of walking on creative problem solving. So one way of studying this is a standard test in psychology for creative thinking, and this is known as the alternative uses test. In this test, you're brought to the laboratory and you're handed a series of common household objects, and your job is to come up with as many uses for those objects as you can in a 30-second or a 1-minute period for each object. What you find is some people are really good at this and some people are very poor at this. Typically, the people who are good at this are people who are knowledge workers who are engaged in creative daily work, and you get a stable expression of this in terms of those populations. Now, let's add a twist, and the twist is walking. So if you bring a population to your lab and you get them to sit and you ask them to engage in this divergent thinking task, they might come up with approximately 6 or so uses for an average household object. However, if you get them to go and walk for about 10 minutes or so prior to engaging in the divergent thinking task, what you find is you about double the number of ideas that the person generates. There are lots of other ways of testing whether this effect is true or not. One is to ask people to sit on a treadmill or walk on a treadmill, and you get the same effect. You get a boost to creative ideation, creative generation of ideas as a result of having engaged in a prior period of movement compared to being seated for that prior period. So walking can have a profound effect on your ability to generate new ideas. More importantly, a replication of that study focused on the difference between people in their early 20s and people in their late 60s and early 70s. And they found in this study that free walking enhances divergent thinking in both young and older adults. But the older adults who were engaged in a short period of walking before doing this divergent thinking task generated about twice as many ideas compared to the seated young adults. So this may be a means of unlocking your creative powers. If you're feeling stuck on a problem, just get up and move. Leave the problem, go for a walk and come back to it, and you may find that you've come to a solution to that problem. Now, let's just think about how we walk for a moment and whether or not we get lost when we're moving around. Here's an example of Boston Dynamics robot. You can see that it staggers as it moves when it's walking on a snowy surface, and it finds it difficult to walk in a straight line. Now, humans are good at walking in straight lines so long as we have a fixed beacon to walk by. So something like the sun, a mountain top, something like that, that allows us to keep a constant orientation. However, in conditions where there's heavy cloud, where you can't see the horizon and you can't make out homing beacons, people actually do walk in circles. We walk straight for short periods of time, or short periods of distance rather, about 20 to 40 meters or so, and then gradually we start to turn back on ourselves. The picture you're looking at here is of a forest in Germany when people are navigating in conditions of light versus conditions of cloud, and they're being tracked using GPS. And indeed, people do turn in circles, and this is at the core of the problem of getting lost when we're out in the wilderness. When you can't see where you're going, you can't recalibrate your position regularly, which is something that you need to do when you're moving in the world. So not alone do we need to track the amount of movement we're engaging in, we need to recalibrate that movement using visual inputs. Now, what I want to do next is talk a little bit about what the future holds for walking. The share of the world living in cities is now more than 50%. It's as high as 95% in Brazil, but every society that we look at is rapidly urbanizing, which means by definition, most of our walking will be urban. It will be in towns and cities. And the question is, how are our towns and cities going to treat us as walkers? Our streets used to be terrible for walkers. This is a famous poem from London in the early 1700s, where it was noted widely that walking was hazardous because people emptied their chamber pots. And you'll see at the entrance to many Georgian buildings these boot scrapers to allow people to scrape the unpleasantness from their shoes and boots prior to entering into a person's house. Now that problem has been dealt with, but we do have many others. And our streets are quite often still terrible for walkers. And this is a problem because everywhere we look, people are living longer. Now, how do you put those two thoughts together? Well, you put them together in the following way. You look at how easily older pedestrians are able to get around in towns and cities. And this very important study by Laura Asher and her colleagues a few years ago looked at people aged 65 plus and asked, could they cross the road in time? So they studied 3,145 adults, and they aged 65 plus, and they found that 84% of males and 94% of females had a walking impairment, and they walked at below the speed necessary to cross the road at signal controlled junctions. This is very disturbing. This means that the needs of people who have walking impairments, mobility impairments, are disregarded systematically where city design is concerned. And we really need to bring people with mobility impairments right into the center of conversations about how we should design our towns and cities. And this is an example. This is from Galway. This is where I'm from. And on the edge of Galway, the new motorway design, which was just put in place last year, has ensured that to get from one side of the road to the other takes on average 14 minutes for healthy young adults, because they haven't bothered to put in any pedestrian crosswalks. In other words, the needs of the mobility of cars have been prioritised over the needs of the mobility of individuals. Can you imagine trying to traverse this in a wheelchair? It would be a nightmare. Now, how much do you walk? Most people don't know how much they walk. If you ask people to self-report on walking, the guesses they engage in vary wildly, and they might resort to how much time rather than many steps. But we now, because of smartphones, have a very good estimate of how much people walk, and we don't walk much. It's about 4,500 steps per day in most societies, with the Japanese walking the most, on average of about 5,500 steps per day, and the Saudi Arabians walking the least, at about 3,000 steps per day, because there's very poor walking infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. If we design our towns and cities well, what you find is that high walkable cities, people walk a lot in, as you can see here, right throughout the day and right throughout the weekend. And in poor walkable cities, people walk less. So the infrastructure that we provide makes a huge difference. I'm going to skip that slide, but the key point I want to make here is that the needs of motorists are prioritised over the needs of pedestrians, and this is a major problem. We really do need to focus on the needs of pedestrians more, because after all, when you decant from your car, what are you? You are a pedestrian. And this is what I would like to see. Of course, I can dream. This is Taormina in Italy, in Sicily rather. And the acronym that I offer is that our towns should be built according to the principle of ease. They should be easy to walk, they should be accessible to all, including people with mobility impairments, visual impairments or whatever. They should be safe, we shouldn't mix cars and people. And of course our towns and cities should be enjoyable. And that would really make living in our towns and cities much more enjoyable and make them happier places than they might currently be. This is just a report from the UK and on the Glasgow effect, but the key point that it makes here is that green space access and quality in deprived areas is not what it could be, and there's a need to improve green space by providing green space within 300 metres of everybody's home. Now, I'm just going to come into the last point here on another important reason for movement. The Lancet conducted an important series of studies published an important series of studies over the last couple of years, focusing on how we can prevent dementia in the population at large. And its key point is this, that there are risk factors for dementia that we can do something about. These are the modifiable risk factors. One of them is hearing loss, one that I was really surprised by. If we assess hearing loss in midlife, we can probably reduce factors related to dementia by about 9%. But in their summary, what they do is emphasize this point that we can dementia-proof society by placing exercise at the core of a series of recommendations. It will reduce depression, it will build people's social networks, it will reduce obesity, and it will have other effects on inflammatory factors in the brain. We really do need to engage in changing policies, and this is one reason I was delighted to be able to speak today, to emphasize this point, that many of the things that we fear as a result of aging are actually in our own hands, that by modifying what we do in the here and now, we can have a marked effect on how outcomes might occur in the future. So I'm going to summarize here at this point because I realize I've gone a little over time, and I apologize for that. This is what we should be doing. We should be seated less, and we should be moving more. If you want to follow me on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Shane O'Mara 3. You can find me on Instagram at Shane Writer, and I also publish a regular newsletter called Brain Pizza at brainpizza.substack.com, where I put lots of pieces on active living and the brain. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for that very inspirational, informative and humorous talk. I'm sure after listening to that, there have got to be some questions from some of the audience. So please do engage with us on the question and the panel at the side of your screen here, because otherwise it's going to be a very, very short question and answer session at the end, because we don't have very many questions coming through yet. But no, really, a really great inspirational speech. So much to learn from it, and you know, it's really good just to get a very different take on walking from a very much a research perspective, but then at the very end to bring it back to very much what we're about in outdoor recreation Northern Ireland, about the need to improve green space close to where people live so that they have the opportunities to get out and actually to go for a walk. And so that brings us on really nicely to our next presentation. So the next presentation is a pre-record from Aileen Martin, Head of Marketing in Outdoor Recreation NI, and Duncan Stewart from 56 Degrees Insight. And it's all about the research that has been undertaken very recently on the importance of walking and being active in the outdoors and the benefits that that brings. Both Duncan and Aileen are online, so they will be engaging with us in the question and answer session later on this morning. So Elizabeth will now cue up the video. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. Firstly, a word of thanks to Shane for that wonderful inspirational talk this morning on walking. My name is Aileen Martin and I work for Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland. And this morning I would like to share with you some new research on outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland. It's literally hot off the press, so you're very lucky. You're the first to see it and hear about it. So I'll share a few slides with you as some context, but then I'm going to hand over to Duncan Stewart, 56 Degree Insight, the research company who led on this research, and he'll take you through the key findings. I'm sure there are some research enthusiasts in the audience, but for many, I'm sure you're thinking, when you hear the word research, do we really need more research? Can we not get on and take action? So there is indeed a lot of research available on outdoor recreation. We have seen the evidence papers and the research papers. There's just two particular reports that I wanted to highlight that consider all of these papers together in their totality. So the Space to Thrive is a national lottery review, and it looks at over 380 studies focusing on the benefits of visiting parks and urban green spaces, and that was published in 2019. And then the other one I wanted to highlight was the BOSS report. So that's the benefits of outdoor sports for society, and that was published in 2017. And that looked at over 100 studies focusing on the more physically demanding activities and the benefits to society there. So there is a huge amount already out there. However, what there is a lack of specific information on outdoor recreation participation in Northern Ireland. And that means it's hard to provide an accurate picture of the value it brings to Northern Ireland society. This diagram illustrates many of the key outcome areas included in the current draft programme for government. And so, as we all know, outdoor recreation contributes to many of these programme for government outcomes. It improves health and well-being, be it physical health or mental health and well-being, protecting the environment, tackling inequality, growing and indeed greening the economy, increasing active travel, and other areas such as enhancing education and learning. However, as we have no data for Northern Ireland, it's difficult to demonstrate the quantum of contribution of outdoor recreation to all of these outcome areas. And consequently, the draft programme of government makes very little direct reference to outdoor recreation or related areas such as the provision of green spaces, which offer venues for outdoor recreation. So in answer to my earlier question, is there a need for research? Then I believe yes, there is a need for research because there's little evidence specifically relating to Northern Ireland, and therefore it's really difficult to put the case forward to government. However, we do believe that there is an opportunity for outdoor recreation to have an elevated position in the programme for government now or going forward, and the research will really go a long way to help put that case forward. The lack of specific research to Northern Ireland on outdoor recreation was acknowledged by SORG. Many of you will be familiar with SORG already. Those who aren't, it stands for Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group, and it's made up of representatives from government departments, government agencies and so on. So you can see the list there, but essentially it includes Department for Communities, DAERA, Department of Health, CLOA, PHA, Tourism NI, Sport NI, to name a few. And SORG really wanted to address this issue, so it was agreed to support the commissioning of some primary research. Funding came from DAERA, and that came to us in outdoor recreation to commission that research. 56 Degree Insight were the research company that were successful in the procurement process. They're based in Scotland, and they bring strong previous experience, so they've been involved in population level research in outdoor recreation in England and Scotland in the past. In this piece of work, there really was two aspects to it. The first was really looking at any existing government research, primary research, such as the Continuous Household Survey and the Health Survey for Northern Ireland. However, the main body of their work has been to design and carry out the first ever population level research specific to outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland. So that's what they have been doing, and that was carried out in November and December just past. You'll be glad to know there's additional waves of the research planned, and funding has been secured from DAERA for that, so that's fantastic news going forward as well. So, hot off the press yesterday, I'm delighted to launch Outdoor Recreation, People, Nature and Health, Northern Ireland's first population level research on outdoor recreation. So I'm just going to hand over to Duncan Stewart of 56 Degree Insight now, who's going to take you through the key findings.
I'm now going to take you through some of the key results from the research we've been doing with Aideen and the team in Northern Ireland. The project was commissioned by a group of organisations, including Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland and DAERA, and built upon our experience doing other similar projects elsewhere in the UK for organisations with an involvement in outdoor recreation. The first phase of the project was a desk-based review of existing research relating to outdoor recreation. This included results from NISRA's Continuous Household Survey and the Health Survey for Northern Ireland. For the second phase, we worked with ORNI to design and launch a new survey of the Northern Ireland population. The survey was undertaken using an online method with just over 2,000 interviews conducted during November and December last year. The approach we used ensured that the results can be taken as representative of the adult population in Northern Ireland. And for today's presentation, we'll largely be using the results from this new survey, but in some places we've also included some related findings from the other studies we reviewed. We've grouped the results of the research into the PFG key themes as mentioned by Aideen. So let's start with physical activity. During the period of our survey, physical health benefits were the most common reason for taking visits to the outdoors for leisure. In 63% of visits, the participant wanted to get some exercise, and in 49% of cases, health and exercise was a motivator. So overall, 73% of visits were taken for one or both of these reasons. By recording the activities people were doing on outdoor visits, the intensity of the activity and how long they were taking part for, we can estimate that 27% of the population met the CMO physical activity guidelines through outdoor recreation. However, the benefits gained from outdoor recreation are not equal across the population. For example, this analysis of the Continuous Household Survey results show how the percentage of people taking visits at least once a week was just 50% in the most deprived parts of Northern Ireland, compared to 82% in the least deprived areas. Moving on to the benefits of outdoor recreation related to mental health and well-being. So reasons related to well-being, such as seeking to relax and unwind, finding peace and quiet, revitalizing or spending time with others, were frequently provided reasons for taking visits to the outdoors. And when it comes to the benefits that people gain from spending time outside, the results are even clearer. During November and December, 2/3 of those who took visits said it made them feel calm and relaxed, and a similar percentage felt refreshed and revitalized afterwards. Overall, 86% of people who had taken visits gained one or both of these benefits. And backing up these results, the Health Survey of Northern Ireland showed a clear correlation between how long someone took part in walking and their claimed levels of life satisfaction. The data also suggests that there are environmental benefits linked to outdoor recreation. Around 2 in 5 visits to the outdoors were motivated by a desire to spend time in nature or to enjoy scenery and wildlife. And in around 1/3 of cases, people who had taken outdoor recreation visits reported feeling closer to nature because of this experience. Notably, this proportion was much higher when visit parties included young children or when the visit was taken to certain types of place, including country parks and woodland. The 2017 Continuous Household Survey illustrated how those people in Northern Ireland who took visits most often were also more likely to feel concerned about the natural environment, and generally there's an increasing body of evidence that proves that spending more time outside can lead to a stronger connection with nature, which in turn can drive up levels of concern for nature and taking action to protect the environment. Outdoor recreation can also play a role in helping to tackle inequality. Our survey results have shown how currently, though, the opportunities to participate aren't always equal for everyone. Firstly, we can see how during November and December last year, the coronavirus pandemic meant that many people changed the amount of time they spent outdoors, with some increasing their time, but others spending less time outside. However, these changes varied within demographic groups. Members of the most affluent socioeconomic groups, people in full-time employment, younger age groups, and people with a car were the most likely to increase their time outdoors. However, disabled people, women, people aged 65 and over, and residents of the most deprived areas were the most likely to reduce the amount of time they spent outside. We also see inequalities in the provision of green spaces, paths and trails across Northern Ireland. For example, as shown here, paths and trails tend to be less accessible for people with disabilities, for residents of rural areas, and for women. Another area also linked to health and the environment which we looked at was active travel. Firstly, we could see from the long-running travel survey for Northern Ireland that the percentage of total journeys which were made on foot or by cycling has increased only marginally over the last decade or so. Our outdoor recreation survey also recorded the modes of transport used in visits to different types of place. We found that overall 55% of outdoor visits were taken on foot, but this was much higher when visits were taken to certain places, including parks, playing fields, and paths and cycleways. These findings reinforce the importance of providing these types of place for people to spend time in locally. A further benefit of outdoor recreation is the potential economic benefits of this activity. There are many ways of quantifying this. Our survey looked at the amounts of money spent during outdoor recreation visits taken in November and December 2020. Across all of the visits taken, we found that an average of £4.40 was spent. This doesn't sound like a great deal, but given the frequency of visit taking we recorded, we can use this figure to obtain a grossed up estimate of the total amount spent on all visits taken by the whole population during the November and December period. As you can see, it comes to a large amount, almost £100 million. And as shown in the pie chart, this spend was largely on fuel used on journeys and food and drink. It's very likely that the restrictions around coronavirus at the time would have impacted on how people would be able to spend money. from our survey and other studies we reviewed can help us to plan for the post-COVID recovery. We saw already how during this period, while some people had spent more time outdoors, many others had actually reduced their time outside, and that certain population groups had been more negatively impacted. A survey conducted by ORNI during the first lockdown pointed at the types of things we need to be doing to improve opportunities for local outdoor leisure. As you can see, whilst the most common feedback related to dealing with dogs and dog mess, nearly all the other comments related to improving access by opening up more dedicated trails for walking and cycling, more green spaces, and improved access rights. These results provide some really clear pointers towards what needs to be done next. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you for your time. Now, I'm now going to hand back to Aideen, who will complete our presentation. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Duncan, for that overview. The field report is available on the Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland website, and we'll also provide a link to that on the chat here today. The research does illustrate the many positives that outdoor recreation does bring, including the fact that the majority of people do get outdoors every week, and the vast mental and physical health benefits that it brings. However, there are a number of areas for improvement. So we know that participation decreases as deprivation increases. Also, that access to trails and green space is a problem, with 29% of people saying they don't have access to green space within easy walking distance of their home. And indeed, that is particularly true for certain groups of the population, including unemployed people, people with a disability, and in rural areas. If the barriers to participation and access to the outdoors can be tackled, then there are many benefits for the whole of society, and really it's up to us now to harness this research to do that. With that in mind, we believe that targets should be placed in the programme for government. So we're proposing 2 new targets and maintaining the active travel programme for government indicator. 90% of the population within a 5-minute walk from their home of quality green and blue space, 90% of the population visiting the outdoors at least once a week. And each of these programme for government targets should cascade to future government and local government strategies, policies, funding packages, and delivery alongside relevant partners. I think we all agree if those targets were included in the programme for government for Northern Ireland, then we'd arrive at a society where more people were physically active outdoors, increased levels of happiness and life satisfaction, more people with access to their environment, more equal provision of that across all population groups, increased proportion of journeys taken by foot and bicycle, and economic benefits, including wider savings to the NHS. So this evidence gives us a great base to put the argument forward to really reach this goal. Thank you very much for your time today. Please go onto our website, outdoorrecreationni.com, afterwards and view the research in a little bit more detail, and please share it wide and far. Thank you. I'll now hand back to Caroline.
Okay, thank you very much to Aideen and to Duncan. It's so good to see hard evidence now. I mean, we've been living on anecdotal research for years, and now for the first time we have that hard evidence for Northern Ireland. And as Aideen says, it's great to come out with a piece of research at the end from which we can make clear recommendations to government into the programme for government, and hopefully the departments will take note of that research that's just been carried out, and I'm sure they will. So thank you to both Aideen and Duncan for that presentation. Also, just to say thank you to DAERA for funding the research as well, and as Aideen mentioned, there are going to be further waves of the research in the future. We now come to a really important part of the conference for our own organisation as we launch our new strategic plan for 2020 to 2025. We had hoped to do this last year up in Stormont, but COVID overtook, and so we've been working away on our strategic plan. We've already 1 year completed, even though we're going to launch it today. So I'm going to hand over to Dawson Stelfox, the Chair of Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland, just to, he'll give you a little flavour of what is in our new plan. So Dawson, handing over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I suppose the privilege really for the last 20 years of being the chair of ORNI since its inception. And throughout a lot of that time, we've been relying, I guess, on instinct and knowledge and experience as to what the strategy should be and how those should be developed. But we now have a lot more, as you just heard, research to back up that strategy and that development. And we've used the last year, as Carolyn said, we were hoping to launch this new strategy last year, but we've used the last year to do more research and to understand a lot more about what's happening to society in probably what are going to be permanent changes to the way people access to the countryside as a result of new ways of exploring the world around us that people have got used to. I think everybody knows now that there are greater numbers than ever who are going out into the outdoors. And our challenge, I suppose, is to ensure that's not just a welcome blip, but to sustain responsible engagement with the outdoors. Because with that obviously comes demands for the need for investment in the outdoor environment to make it environmentally sustainable, to manage the impacts of people, to make it safe, but also to keep people engaged. And that's really what the core of what our strategy is about. Shane has already articulated the science behind the benefits of walking, and I suppose the new thing is now we're able to take that science, that knowledge, with our own experience and with the research that you've just heard about from Aidan and Duncan, and research which is based in Northern Ireland and based on what people are actually doing in Northern Ireland rather than extrapolating it from elsewhere. And we've used that to shape and to form the strategic plan that we're launching today. As Aidan has already told you, there's lots of good, robust findings out of that. And although they do paint a good picture of what's happening, they also show that there's a lot more things to be done, a lot more progress to be made, in particular on the access to trails and to green space for people, and particularly true for people in urban environments, but also in rural areas, particularly some rural areas which don't still, despite being surrounded by the outdoors, don't have easy access to it. Particular then in terms of people who are at the lower socio-economic groups and those with a disability. So although there's a lot more people participating in outdoors, it's actually worsened inequalities in that, and the findings are that people who are able to get out, people in higher economic groups, and people who have cars, people who are, if you like, in stable families and stable relationships, people who are able, have all been able to make the opportunities better during the pandemic, but that's left a lot of groups behind. And so a key part of our strategy is how to make the countryside and the open space and green space more accessible to people who are unemployed, people with no cars, people least affluent social economic groups, people with disabilities. At the core of this is our vision, and really more active, healthy society. We've described it also as a happier, healthy society. Enjoyment and appreciation of the outdoors improves well-being. And that's really at the core of all outdoor recreation is about what we all, staff and the directors, the volunteers, all work towards, is we want people to get out more into the outdoors, we want them to appreciate it, we want them to get the benefits for that. How do we do that? Then there's, we've set out in the plan a number of strategic priorities. These are the sort of building blocks to how we get success in that. Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland is a very small, not-for-profit organisation. Really what we've been concentrating on, I suppose, on is partnership, working with a very wide range of other bodies. But also a principle, I suppose, of thinking behind it is that if we can get the strategies and the actions right, then the outcomes will flow from that. And for the last 20 years, we've seen it's important to match that development of policy and strategy with the physical developments on the ground. The two are crucial. So that's putting in trails, opening up play areas, getting access to the countryside that we have all around us, the fantastic countryside we have. So it's that combination of getting the policy right, getting the strategy right, but also crucially important, that physical implementation of access on the ground. Within the strategic plan, there are 5 sort of key priority areas, and in each of those there's a number of actions. There's a total of 19 actions really altogether, and I'm not going to go through all 19 of those, you'll be glad to know, but I wanted to pick a few out of each of these 5 broad topics just to make an emphasis on. And the point about championing the outdoors, I think this is key, is that, I mean, we've already heard from 4 government ministers. You could nearly take any minister in any department in our government and say that there is a relationship to active use of the outdoor environment, active walking, active activities outside. And just to pick one which we haven't heard from today, but it's crucially important, is the economic benefits through tourism, through spending in the areas. So that's a great advantage, but it also can mean that it's not any one particular department's top priority. It's a priority, it's their responsibility of all the departments, but it's not necessarily the top priority of any particular one. So the key to that is that there needs to be champions for the outdoors who are connecting together these different departments and linking together the strategies, and that's what we see one of the roles of outdoor recreation is. So our job is to champion the need for the prominence of outdoor recreation within the programme for government and the key national and regional strategies, policies and funding programmes. And part of that is legislation as well. There is a discussion documents out at the moment on new outdoor recreation bill through DAERA, which we hope will provide opportunities to meet the growing demand for outdoor recreation. So we want to be a champion of the outdoors and to link together the different departments. Our second main aim is on delivering training and sharing best practice. And again, we have a number of actions within that. But one of the key ones, again, is acting as this sort of outdoor recreation hub. So we become the connecting body and we connect the government departments, the different organisations, the Visitor Safety Group, which is a UK and Ireland-wide body, an Outdoor Recreation Network, again, a UK and Outdoor Recreation-wide body. And what we're doing in that is discovering the best practice. The research has already pointed out a lot of really good practice in isolated areas around Britain and Ireland. One of our jobs is to try and connect that together, to publicise that, and to make that research, to make that good practice available to everyone. And there's lots of really good things happening which can make a real difference in Northern Ireland. And the third strategic aim is about planning and developing quality experiences. And that's what I mentioned earlier on, is it's not just good enough, really, it's about to develop a strategy or a policy. It needs to be practically developed, and in particular in relation to the sort of things we do, it means physical development on the ground. And as many of you know, we've been doing that for many years now, and putting in trails, play areas, dealing with visitor experiences and tourism areas, and linking together the delivery mechanisms, the people, the outdoor providers that are there on the ground delivering these experiences to people. So we need to ensure that innovation and quality is at the forefront of outdoor recreation experiences, and crucially deliver that on the ground and show how we can open up the countryside. One of the current really successful ways of doing that is through the community trail networks that we're developing now from many councils right around Northern Ireland. The fourth aim is about increasing awareness, and that's really making sure that we can get the message out as to what is available. There's a lot of evidence that shows people will go places where they know about them, where they get good information about them, where they feel welcome when they get there, and they can sort of predict, if you like, what sort of experience they're likely to have there. And that's all about getting that information out through marketing, through branding, through sharing that information out in a way which is attractive to people. And that's more important than ever, as a lot of the people who are going out now do not come from necessarily the backgrounds where they have an understanding of what to do, where to go, how to behave in the countryside. So getting that information out to people is crucially important. And finally, our fifth strategic aim is about widening, increasing and sustaining participation. And that's really about getting the number of people, increasing the number of people out into the countryside. And that's to do with us then championing the new a new lead walking scheme in Northern Ireland, encouraging insufficiently active people to walk in their community and their local community. But it's about getting actual tangible and extra numbers of people out into the countryside. So how do we do that? I think we all realise that it's just as it's not one government department's responsibility, so it's not one organisation's responsibility, and partnership working is fundamental to this. There's a number of bodies that are crucially involved in that, from government at policy making level to the participants, the providers, the people who make a living out of providing activities and experiences in the countryside. Crucially, the land starting a piece of work in collaboration with the Ulster Farmers Union at the moment, looking at the impacts of people going out and how we can mitigate those impacts. And also importantly, volunteers. In that, at the moment, Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland have over 200 volunteers delivering about 2,000 hours per year, and that's primarily eyes on the ground, feet on the ground, looking at the trail network, looking at provision of access and reporting back to us and through us to the land managers as to what needs to be done and improved. And that cycle of linkages is crucial to that, and we see the value of Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland being at the centre of that cycle. Our job is to facilitate that, to make it happen, to link together all those different bodies and to improve the experience for everybody going out into the countryside. So crucially, something then that Aideen mentioned in her research bit earlier on, it's the how do you make this happen and what does it look like when it happens. We do now have the baseline research, we have the figures, and this comes at a pretty crucial time because there's an ongoing programme for government draft outcomes framework. The responses are closing on the 22nd of March, and it's an opportune time for us to get actual detailed actions into the programme for government. The research document that we've just shown you and just been launched, the People, Nature and Health Research document, demonstrates that key alignment with the programme for government outcomes. And in fact, you know, the cross-departmental contributions that you've heard from the Minister's statements already all demonstrate in recognition and an appetite for collaboration across government departments, but also with wider society. We think it's pretty important that we use that research now. We demonstrate to government that that is a clear mandate for them to enable more people to be active outdoors. And Aideen's already highlighted these, and I want to sort of stress them with you today. There's three key targets which we would want to see written into the programme for government, and they're listed here on the screen. So 90% of the population within a 5-minute walk of quality green or blue space, 90% of the population visiting the outdoors at least once a week, and an annual increase in the percentage of journeys made by walking and cycling. We think those are proper targets to go into the programme for government. We think they're realistic, and they bring with them then a whole series of benefits to society listed there at the bottom. It's cross-departmental, it's across many different bodies and organisations. It's not an easy task to deliver this, but the research has shown, and I think we all know from seeing it, that there is huge public demand and need, want to get out into the countryside. Shane has demonstrated the benefits from that can be tangibly benefited. The tangible benefits from that long-term benefits to society. And it's in all our interest now to push collectively to get these targets into the programme for government. So that's a very brief run through of our strategic plan for the next 5 years. We need the support from all of you and all of the different bodies and all the government departments to make it happen. But we see it as our role, as I say, to be the facilitators of this, to help it develop and genuinely to create a happier and healthier society. Thank you. And back over to Carla.
Okay, Dawson, thank you very much. And also, just it would be remiss of me not also to thank the rest of the Board of Directors of Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland for their ongoing support in the development of our new strategic plan. So thank you for that, and hopefully that'll have given you a bit of a flavour of what our priorities are for the next 5 years. And I think, as you can see very clearly, they do very much align with Programme for Government thoughts. So we have now just got about 5 to 7 minutes for a question and answer opportunity with our key speakers this morning. So thank you to all those that have been sending in questions on the chat panel. I'm going to come first of all to Shane with a question. So Shane, the first question, well, there's 3 questions really, and they're all very much about the same issue. One is, how many steps do you recommend to walk each day? How much walking is enough to have a significant impact? And again, how much is there enough? Is there an optimal recommended amount of weekly walking? So Shane, what's your answer to that, please?
So the first thing I'll say is turn your mobile phone step counter on. People don't know how many steps they make every day, but we know, as I said, the average adult walks around about 4,500 steps a day, which isn't very many. What you really need to be doing is north of 7,500 per day, and ideally you need to do that in a couple of bursts. There's quite a bit of literature showing that, for example, mortality, the risk of mortality falls by about 40 to 50% for people who are getting up above 7,500 steps per day. So somewhere around that. My usual recommendation is 5,000 more than you're doing, because you're not doing very much. If you want to target cardiovascular health, though, with walking, what you need to be doing is walking at a pace that makes it difficult to talk to somebody else. So you have to concentrate on your breathing. So for me, that's around 6.5 kims per hour, but for somebody else, that might be 4.5 kims per hour. It just depends, but that's a good rule of thumb.
Great, Shane, for answering that. Another question that has come in here is on the Hunt study that you referred to. And the question is, was it simply following behaviour in the long term? And if so, surely depression could cause less walking rather than walking causing less depression.
Yeah, so it's the Harvey study, not the Hunt study. So that's a really good question, and the answer is teasing apart causality is difficult in these things. We know behavioural akinesis is a major problem with depression. We know behavioural activation therapies in depression focus on getting people moving again, but I think the general sense is that when you look at active living versus inactive living populations, risk factors for every or almost every morbidity that you can think of go up in people who are inactive. So the risk of cancer goes up, the risk of heart disease goes up, negative and malign changes in personality go up. So it's not, teasing causality out, as I've said, is hard, but it is likely that being active contributes to a kind of a preventative effect.
Okay, great, thanks Shane. And there's a couple of questions in for Aidan and Duncan, and maybe Duncan, I'll just start with a question to yourself. It's a question in from Helen, and it says, any idea why there is a difference in access and participation for women?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and what I think this relates back to is actually the how women and men spend time outdoors in different ways. So overall, there are some differences we see in terms of places visited, motivations, activities undertaken. In general, women are more likely to spend time close to home, taking shorter visits. More often, the motivations are, compared to men, this is all relative, for dog walking, spending time with family, entertaining children. So places visited are more likely to be close proximity, shorter visits taken on foot as well, more likely than men. This is all on average when we compare our large sample. Whereas with men, the activities and places visited are more likely, activities are more likely to be sporting, so as in running, mountain biking, more active pursuits. And also maybe because of that, distances travelled are further afield to go to places, more often going in the car. So we see quite different motivations, reasons, and so on. And I think this explains why, although the male and female population are generally living and distributed in a similar way, we see women more likely to say that there's an issue with a lack of local green spaces than men, because they're more using these types of places. I think this explains that difference.
Thanks, Duncan. And Aideen, can I just follow up maybe with you on that question? What initiatives does Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland have planned to engage in the group of women?
We are currently working on a project called Walking for All. In fact, it's a partnership between Sport Northern Ireland and the Public Health Agency. And what it is we're trying to form a single coordinated lead walking scheme across Northern Ireland. And really the objective there is to try and get walking happening regularly, weekly, in every settlement in Northern Ireland, okay, and that would be led walking by volunteers, and one of the key groups within that initiative will be women. So it tends to be women and older people, and really what we're trying to do is get that regular walking that happens every week, and our ultimate aim is really to get it to a point where GP and other healthcare professionals can confidently refer into it. So this really makes a very strong case for the NHS and our health trusts to link up to physical recreation as a prescription, and very much dovetails into the green prescription and what we're trying to achieve there. So we know that walking is the #1 recreational activity for physical activity in Northern Ireland generally, and that's particularly high for women. And so within this initiative, we really want to focus on that. So that project has been scoped out, and the economic impact study has been done, so it's shovel ready. And so currently we have Sport Northern Ireland, the Department of Health, PHA, are looking for substantial funding to get that up and running and started. So that's really the key thing we'll be focusing on for women.
Thanks, Aideen. Well, that's very encouraging to hear just how far you are along with that project. I'm just going to finish with one last question that has come in, and maybe Aideen, you again are best placed to answer this. The question is basically, have you mapped all the green and blue spaces against population so that you're able, to achieve that programme for government, 90% population within a 5-minute walk of green and blue space? So how do you actually do that? Have you mapped green and blue space, I think is basically the question.
Yeah, again, this is something we're looking at. It's a considerable piece of work. So we're working with a lot of different partners, including Ordnance Survey Northern Ireland, to be able to map all of those places. So we've quite a bit of the work done, but there's still a way to go to be able to accurately do that and accurately map all of that. What we actually would like to do then is, once that we have that mapped, then we can look at where the population resides and bring those two together to give a very accurate figure of how close people are to local green spaces, green and blue spaces. So it's a very interesting exercise, and it should be a key target for Programme for Government that we'd like to see included, and we'll be able to measure against that on our mapping system. And as well as that, it's a really important tool for planning going forward for both urban and rural planners and people involved in outdoor recreation and housing, tool to understand where those green and blue spaces are, where there's a lack of those blue and green spaces that need to be focused on, and how that should be taken into consideration as part of the planning process, and prioritising areas for further development of those green and blue spaces. So we're well underway, but again, there's some work to be done in that, and I think some support from the Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group will be forthcoming for that.
Great. Thanks, Aileen. Can I just thank most sincerely all our speakers this morning, the ministers, the 4 ministers who have taken part, to Shane, our keynote speaker, to Dawson, to Aileen, to Duncan. Thank you all so much for your contribution this morning. I think we've learned so much, and hopefully we're in a much better place going forward to contribute to Programme for Government. Now, just after the break, for the second session this afternoon, if you haven't already received your access link, or you're having trouble getting in this afternoon, just email Kerry at Outdoor Recreation NI, and she will try and sort you out. And as a little bit of fun over lunchtime, what we're giving to you is a little challenge. So we're saying to you, get outside now during your lunch break, stretch those legs, get moving, take a photograph, upload it onto Twitter, hashtag ORNI. And when you come back at 1 o'clock, the best photograph will be given a book of Shane's book, In Praise of Walking, a New Scientific Exploration. And just a word of note, if any of Outdoor Recreation NI staff do it, it would be great to get your photographs, but you won't win the book, because that just wouldn't be fair. So thank you to all who have participated this morning, and hopefully we'll see you back with your legs stretched at 1 o'clock for the afternoon session. Thank you.